Hello there, time for another video tutorial, and this time around we'll be working with modifiers. Yes, this panel right here. And when you want to work with abstract motion graphics and stuff like that, you'll soon find out that you have to work a lot with these guys in order to produce some interesting results. So we'll be taking them a lot in the future. And let's begin. I'll hit the delete key to delete my cube, and I'll hit Shift A to add mesh a cylinder. Now over here I'm going to deselect cap ends. I'll leave the vertices at 32, and I'll hit the tab key to switch from object to edit mode, hit the R key to rotate and Y on the Y axis. I'll rotate my cylinder for 90 degrees. I'll hit the S key to scale it up, scale it two times. Okay, and I'm also going to hit S again and X to constrain scaling on the X axis, and I'm going to scale it on the X axis as well. Now we got our cylinder here. I'll hit Ctrl R for a loop cut, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel lots of times for lots of loop cuts, and I'm going to stop at about here. Now what I want here is to have, faces that are pretty much perfect squares. Okay, now tab key to switch from edit to object mode, and let's add our first modifier for our cylinder, and it's going to be a build modifier. Now we've seen the build modifier in a video tutorial before, and what the build modifier does is that if I hit now Alt A, it builds the geometry of our object within the time frame. It starts from frame 1 when we have no vertices at all, and it moves up and until frame 100 we're having the full object in place. Now what we're going to do now is set the number of frame from 107 to 50, so that the build modifier selects roughly half of the vertices for our object. Now I'll click randomize, and you see what we get. Now that looks pretty interesting. I'll hit 3 on my numeric keypad, I'm at right perspective view, and 5 to switch to right ortho. I'll hit comma, the delete key on my numeric keypad to bring my view here, and scroll in to zoom, and I'll hit Ctrl Alt and 0 just to place my camera. Now I'm going to hit the G key and X to grab on the X axis, and I'm going to move it back at about there. We'll fine-tune the camera later on, but I think it's pretty nice for now. 15 on the X-axis. Okay. Now let's move on with our modifiers. I am right-clicking my cylinder to select it, and I'm going to add another modifier, and it's going to be a Solidify modifier. Now I'm sure most of you know what the Solidify modifier does, and what it actually does is that it takes a flat object like a plane, or in that case our cylinder, which is pretty much flat, and it adds some thickness to it. Now if we scale the thickness, you can see that we have a thicker object. Okay, I'm going to set it at 0.08. We could fiddle with this later on, but I think we're okay for now. What I'm also going to do is add a third modifier, and it is going to be a Displace modifier. Now click Displace, and what the Displace modifier needs in order to do something, because as you can see now it doesn't affect our cylinder, it needs a texture. Now I'll go over here at the object materials. I'll add the material to my cylinder. I'll bring down the specular for my material, and I'll now switch to textures for my material. I'll click new and just make sure you deselect this one right here so that the this specific texture won't be used by the material. Now back to our modifiers, and I'll click here to select a texture for the Displace modifier, and let's click texture. Now as you can see, the Displace modifier is messing with our geometry, and that is pretty much what we want. I'll bring the strength down a bit. We don't want it to, to displace, to deform our geometry all that much. I think at 0.4 it'll be good, and yeah, I think it's moving on pretty nice. Now what I'm also going to do is add a wave modifier. Okay, now this is 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th modifier for our cylinder, and as you can see, the good thing about this technique is that if we click on those little eyes and make the modifiers invisible, you can see that what we have here is just a cylinder. So as you can imagine, we can easily modify this object and get wholly different results from our modifiers. You see how drastically the modifiers change the geometry of our object. Now we've added the wave modifier, and I'm going to check the animation for a while. Don't worry, you won't be seeing anything because we also have the build modifier applied, and it works from frame 1 to frame 100. But don't worry, I only want to see the wave modifier, how it works. So I'll hit Alt A to take a look, and I think it moves pretty fast. I'm going to change the speed from 0.25 to 0.1. Okay, that's slightly better. And I'm also going to say, let's increase the height to 1. Okay, and I'll fiddle a bit with the width. Let's see, at 5. Also going to decrease the narrowness. I'll bring it down to 0.70, and I'm also going to reposition the center. As you can see, we have these position values here for the wave, and what these do is they move the initial wave. So let's let it refresh, and you can see that the wave now starts not from the middle of our object, but it moves far away. I'll set it to -9, and I think we're at about there. Now I'll hit the pause button to stop the animation, and I'll set it back to frame 50 so that the build modifier works as desired. Now I'm going to hit 0 on my numeric keypad to switch to camera perspective view. And what I'm going to do now is add a particle system for the cylinder. I'll hit the plus icon here at the particle system, and I'm going to create, Shift A to add mesh and ecosphere. I'll create an ecosphere as a particle. I'll set the subdivisions to 1, and I'll move it to the side so we can see it. That's the ecosphere. Now also hit the M key to move it to the second layer. Now back to the cylinder. Let's select our cylinder. Now I'll hit 0 for the camera perspective view again. And back to our particle system. I'm going to use the volume of our object for our particles to be emitted. I'm also going to set the start and end to 1, So we're having particles from the beginning of the animation, and I'm going to change the lifetime roughly. You could change this roughly at the end of your animation, just making sure that the particles will live for your entire animation. So we're selecting, volume to emit from volume. We need random here, and I'm also going to change the physics, and that's pretty important, from Newtonian to no. And I'm also going to select the object, because I want my particle system to use an object, and I'm going to select my ecosphere. Now, as you can see, we have the particles on the cylinder, and the issue with that is, as you can see, the particles are at the outside of the cylinder. So in order to fix this, I'm going to first of all save this one. I'm going to save it as cylinder abstract. Okay, that's nice. And now what I'm going to do is hit Shift D while my cylinder is selected to duplicate the object, and I'm going to move here at the modifiers panel, and I'm going to delete the build modifier. Remember, we have the copy, we're working with a copy of the cylinder now. I'm going also to delete the Solidify modifier. I'm going to keep the Displace modifier and the Wave modifier. And I'll now select my first cylinder, and I'm going to delete the particle system because we don't need it. And as you can see now, the particle system is in the cylinder, and that's because the object that carries the particle system, and it's this cylinder right here, doesn't use the Solidify modifiers, and the volume of the object is actually that of the cylinder. So moving on, what I'm going to do now, while the cylinder with the particle system is selected, I'm going to move here at the materials, and I'm going to click wire material because I want this cylinder to be shown as a wireframe. Now 0 on my camera perspective view, and our final step is to select this cylinder. Wait a minute. Yeah, the first cylinder, the one that has the build and the Solidify modifier, and I'm going to apply the build modifier. So now, if we move back, hit 0 for the camera perspective view, and I'll hit Alt A now, and you can see that now that the build modifier is applied, when frames move by, the animation works fine. Now escape key to cancel the animation, and I'm going to let's first of all render a simple image. You can see that by setting the for our particles here, by setting the physics from Newtonian to no, what this is doing is that it actually tells the particles that you won't be affected by physics at all, and that's why the particles follow the animation, as you can see here. Now if I pause this one just so you can see it and select Newtonian, you can see that the particles follow the gravity and fall down. Now even if I set the gravity to 0 and hit Alt A, sorry, let's go back to frame 1, Alt A, you can see that the particles are doing their thing, which is not what we want. Now setting back to none. Oh, not here, excuse me, at the physics. And let's try and do a first render. I'm going to move to frame to the second layer. I'm going to select my ecosphere. Let's add a material to it. I'm going to click new, and I'll change the color. Let's make it purple. And I'm also going to change the mid value from 0 to 0.3. Okay. Now our ecosphere is ready. I'll move back to layer 1 and I'll select, yes, this is wire, okay, this is what we want. And over at the world settings, I'm going to click indirect lighting, environmental lighting, and I'm going to set the gather to approximate, because indirect lighting doesn't work with the ray trace solution. And I'm going to move some frames until we have that little wave. Okay, and let's try to render an image. So that's what we get, and that's because both these materials have the wireframe display. Okay, I'm going to set this one as a single user material, and I'll select surface, and let's leave it white. Okay, F12 again to render, and that's what we get. Now what I'm going to do is hit the escape key, and I'm going to change the horizon color from black to white, and let's see it again. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Now we can also change the wave settings for the wave modifier. We can make it speedier, but don't forget that you have to change the wave modifier for both the objects. Now we're having a speed of 0.2, 0.2 here, so that both our objects are being equally affected by the wave modifier. Now this is it. We've used a number of modifiers to create an interesting result, and as I'm always saying, you can take it to a whole new direction. I'm going to select this cylinder, and I'm going to create another particle system. I know there was one here, but I've deleted it, and I'm going to hit Shift A to add mesh and ecosphere. Let's add another ecosphere. Let's move it back also so we can see it. Let's add a new material. I'm going to make it, I don't know, blue, and set the emit value to 0.3, and I'm going to select the new particle system, and I'm going to move right here. Make sure you click 2 here to change the particle settings and make them unique for this object, for this emitter. And I'm going to select as an object the second ecosphere. Now I'll hit the M key for this one to move it to layer 2. Going to hit 0, and I'm going to render another image. So we now have two kinds of particles. We have those who are in the cylinder and those who are at the surface and at the outer space of the cylinder, and we can do a lot of stuff. I'm going to hit Shift A to add an empty, Let's resize the empty. Let's make it bigger, and about there. And I'm going to select the camera and hold down the Shift key and right click to select the empty, and I'm going to hit Ctrl P to set parent to object. Now hit 0 for the camera perspective view, and I'm going to hit the R key and Z to rotate on the Z axis. I'm going to move it over here at -40 degrees, and I'm going to change the distance for our camera, 19, and let's move it a bit closer. Yeah, about there. I'm setting the Y to 2, and what I'm also going to do now is going to make some changes on the particle systems, and I'm going to increase the object size for our particles from 0.05. I'm going to set it to 0.1, and I'm also going to add a 0.5 value for the random size, and I'm going to do the same thing for the particles inside. I'm going to set the size to, you can set it to 0.15 and the random size to 1. So I'm going to render again for pretty much a final image, and that's what you get. As always, you can tweak it a lot. You could also, I don't know, for example, uncheck the environment lighting and just let the particles illuminate our scene. And I'm going to also change the horizon color from white to black, and let's re-render. And yeah, you can see this one also looks cool. And as you know, this is pretty much an animation, so it renders pretty fast. It looks okay, and we've seen a way that the modifiers can change our scene, can help us work with abstract clips and animation and motion graphic stuff. So we'll be seeing these modifiers a lot in the future. So for now, thanks for watching. So hi again, I'm watching the result of our video tutorial, and I can't help but thinking that this could be a way better scene. So we'll fiddle with it a bit more just to make it slightly better. I'm going to hit the escape key, and I'm actually using the scene with the world horizon color set to white and the environment lighting is on, and I'm going to move the camera closer. I'll right click this frame to select the camera, and I'm going to move it closer at about 15, and I'm also going to right click the empty, and I'm going to change the rotation value. Let's set it to -24, or let's set it to -26. Yeah, and I'm also going to change these values a bit just to make it look slightly more interesting, and we're good at about there. And what I'm going to do now is I'll move away a bit, and I'm going to select the camera, right click to select the camera, and I'm going to move to the camera panel right here, and I'm going to check limits for the display right here, and we get this yellow cross. And if we change the distance now, we can move the this one is the focus point for our depth of field effect. We can move it closer to our cylinder, and let's set it to at about 8.5 for this one. And now that this is fixed, what we also have to do is re-render so that Blender can recalculate the depth values. So I'm going to hit the escape key, and I'm going to change the particles a bit. I'm going to select let's see which cylinder is this one. Okay, this is the cylinder that affects the particles that are facing in. So I'm going to change the name of it from cylinder 0.001 to cylinder purple. And I'm going to right click to select the other cylinder, and I'm going to change the name from cylinder to cylinder blue. Okay, and I'm going to move to the material settings for the cylinder that uses the blue particles, and I'm going to change the number from 1000 to 2000. Okay, that looks nice. And I'm also going to hit the right arrow to move some frames ahead until we have something interesting. Let's reposition the camera a bit, or excuse me, the empty. At about there. And what I'm also going to do is select this one, the cylinder that affects the purple particles, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier so that the wire will be more dense for the cylinder. And I'm going to re-render. Let's render once more. You can see that the wire is now more dense since the cylinder uses a subdivision surface modifier. And I'm going to hit the escape key, and now it's time to move to the compositing. I'm going to change this window to the node editor over here for compositing and click use nodes. I'm having a render layers node and the composite node right here. I'll hit Shift A to add an output node, and I'm going to need a viewer node just so I can see the changes that I make to this. Let's scale it up a bit. Okay, and what I'm going to first add is hit Shift A to add filter defocus node, and I'm going to link it between the render layers and the composite node. I'll also bring the output to the viewer, and I'll now hit here, check backdrop, and let's see. Okay, for the defocus node here, I'm going to bring the Z value and click use it buffer, and now I'm going to uncheck the preview. So all we have to do now to change the amount of the effect is to change the f-stop value here, and I'm going to set it from 128, let's see, at about 30, just a bit more, 25 maybe, or 20, let's see. Okay, and you can now see the depth of field effect kicks in. You can see that at the back of the object the particles are blurred. And what I'm also going to do is hit Shift A to add a lens distortion. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to click projector and change the dispersion effect from 0 to 0.1. Okay, this is it. Time for the last render. I'm going to set the size 70% for this resolution, and I'm going to take the lens distortion output and make sure to put it on the composite, and let's hit right here to render an image, control up, so we can see the image. And as you can also see, it renders pretty fast, quite a nice looking image. And the important thing is that all we've used here is pretty much the modifiers. So let's try something else. I'm going to the second layer, and I'm going to change the color for our particles. Let's make this one yellow, and let's make this one green. Let's move back to layer 1, and I'm going to do what we did before, change the horizon color from white to black, and deselect the environment lighting, and let's now see how it looks. And that's pretty much a different result. So feel free to create your own systems, play along with the modifiers. You can create some cool stuff, as you can see. So this is it. I'll be posting some results for the animation, because as you know, this is a nice little animation. So we'll be seeing more of the modifiers in the future. So for now, thanks for watching.